Hi, my name is Javier Albornoz, and today I'll be giving you a few audio editing tips. We'll be talking about using handles and zero crossings. A zero crossing is a position in the audio where amplitude is zero. Cutting at zero crossings helps you avoid pops and clicks, which might otherwise be caused by sudden amplitude changes. A lot of software has an option called snap to zero crossing or something similar, and that setting causes your cursor or cuts to automatically move to a point in the audio where amplitude is zero. In this image, you see a waveform, and it's zoomed out to include several seconds, close to maybe 8 to 10 seconds of audio. So you can see the waveform spanning across this point. In the next image, you can see that we've zoomed in a little bit more. So you can start to see some more detail in the waveform. And here we're looking at barely 3 seconds of audio, so you can see the individual amplitude changes are much more visible as you begin to zoom in. As we zoom in even further, here we're looking at, say, about 100 milliseconds, maybe even less of audio. So you can see that the individual spikes in the waveform are much more visible, and you can even start to see across the zero crossing line where these amplitude points are going above and below the zero crossing line. As we zoom in even further, you'll see that we're viewing a very short span of time. And here the individual waveform amplitude spikes are clearly visible, and at this point it's easy to see how you can choose a zero crossing point and make a cut at that specific point. That's where the snap to zero crossing option might be very helpful, because it will guide your cursor to that zero crossing point. As we zoom in even more, and we're looking at only about 5 milliseconds of audio, you can really see the few points where the waveform crosses the x-axis or zero crossings are created. In this case, you can see that there are 3 points visible in these 5 milliseconds where there are zero crossings to cut at. If we were to take it even further and zoom in to only a couple milliseconds, you can really see that zero crossing point clearly visible. In this case, we're seeing the waveform only cross the x-axis one time in this short span of time that we are viewing in this specific audio file. That zero crossing point is exactly where you would want to cut. Whether you're using a snap to zero crossing option or not, that's exactly where you would want to make your cut to avoid any clicks, pops, or any other artifacts that might be caused as a result of not cutting at a zero crossing point. Now let's talk about handles. Handles are audio information that extends beyond the borders of an event's start or an event end. These are used by audio editors for several reasons, including crossfades, when applying noise reduction, joining ambience, etc. So handles, as you may have seen, show up as an option when exporting an OMF file out of video editing software such as Adobe Premiere. There's a number where you can set the amount of handles, in this case 90, which means 90 frames or the equivalent of plus or minus a few milliseconds, say 3 seconds if we're working at 30 frames per second. So what this is telling you is that audio files included as part of the OMF file exported and handed over to the audio producer will include 90 frames or 3 seconds of handles at the start and end of audio files that are included in this OMF bundle. So these are very important for the reason you'll see in this example here. Zoomed in, we have an audio file where you can see the cut as it came from the OMF and delivered by the video editor. This is just audio of dialogue where the start of the person's words were actually cut off, as you can see in the waveform. This is definitely not cut at a zero crossing. Now, without handles, we wouldn't be able to extend the audio to the left, only cut it to the right, where we're further cutting the word. Now, if you look here, we've extended that audio file with our handles, so you can see all the amount of new data that we get from being able to extend it using handles. All of that silence or close to silence is exactly what we need to properly adjust the audio as it begins. Handles are very useful when creating crossfades. Crossfades are used to smoothly join two audio files together, and the same concept as fade in or fade out, but using two audio files, and we're crossfading between them. They can be set symmetrically or asymmetrically, fading from one file to the other. When we're cutting audio, you can see in this example that there are no crossfades, merely just the cut. If we create a crossfade and we zoom in, you'll see that between these two audio files, we have a fade in and fade out shown by the lines, which sometimes can be referred to as keyframes or volume envelopes. All the same thing. Basically, one file fades out as the other fades in. So the general thing to keep in mind is that when you're cutting audio, always be aware of cutting at zero crossings whenever possible. Use the snap to zero crossing feature also, if possible, and definitely include handles when exporting OMF to deliver files to an audio producer.